Thank you. Cheers. Hi, everyone. Cheers for coming to see me talk about real-time rendering at Blue Zoo. What I'm going to try and do is get through this, and so we can have a bit of time for Q&A at the end. But it's quite a few slides, so I'll do my best. So to give you a bit of background on Blue Zoo, if you don't know who we are, we're an animation studio, specialise in kind of CG digital animation. We're actually now just starting a 2D studio as well. But essentially we're a team of kind of artists, animators, producers, directors, coders, everyone, the works. We've tried to do everything in one studio so everyone can really kind of collaborate and enjoy working on projects. So this is our team in July. We've recently grown because we've started on a few big TV projects. So I think now we're just under 200 people. So it's very, very busy times for us. But we never like to stay still, so we're always trying to do new things because we think complacency is very dangerous because we're in such kind of competitive world and industry. You can't afford to stay still. So that's one of the reasons why we're doing the real-time stuff that I'm talking about today. But I thought I'd kick it off by showing you our old showreel because we're just about to release a new one. So here's a bit of a selection of our work. Jumpy selection. So there's a very, cheers. That's a very jumpy example of our work. Let me just check this, hang on a second. Just want to see if any settings have changed. No, don't know why it's jumpy. So as you can see, we do kind of lots of different styles and we're all about collaboration and trying out different things. We do quite a wide range of work. About 3/4 of work is children's TV. I think we've currently got 5 series in production for clients like BBC and Nickelodeon, and our own projects as well. We spend a lot of time developing our own IP, and then also working with other clients. Like we do a lot of advertising work for people like Pokemon and Star Wars brands, and I think the advertising work's about 1/4 of the work we do. Plus, we're involved in lots of external kind of outreach projects like Anadojo, Access VFX, doing apprenticeships, and also software like Panel Forge. So we got there's a lot going on, which keep things exciting. But we really like to focus on making things enjoyable for our staff as well, which is part of the challenge of doing all those different types of work and always trying to do different looks as well, because as you can see from our reel, there's quite a variety of looks. And the real-time rendering is no exception to that. And very proud to recently win in our studio one of the broadcast best places to work in TV, which we're very honoured to have because we really pride ourselves on making a studio where everybody generally is happy and making happy work, which makes a good company. And so that really was proof to us that we were kind of on the right path to making a studio that everybody really loves to work at. So moving on to the real-time rendering side of things, I wanted to include this quote, which is, "It's impossible to live without failing at something unless you live so cautiously that you might as well have not lived at all, in which case you failed by default." And so that's really kind of about the old kind of fail early and fail often, because I think especially in modern society with young people getting into the industry, there's a huge anxiety to be perfect instantly, which is massively exaggerated and increased by social media as well. So I think it's very important to really not to worry about it and just keep on pushing yourself and experimenting. And there's only one way you can do that, is by keeping on experimenting and be willing to fail. And you might wonder what that's got to do with real-time animation, but essentially it's all about moving fast. When speed is one of your main advantages over your competition, because I always distract myself when I put this clip on. I shouldn't put it on. Because it's all about ideas and iterating fast, learning fast, working fast, and getting that kind of fast destination to being perfect. And something we've tried to do at Blue Zoo for the last 19 years is be efficient without compromising quality to make happy artists. So to roll back a bit, so we started off in 2000 using Maya and using Maya software renderer, which probably no one in this room has used, but it's a horrible, painful experience. And we used it because when we first started Blue Zoo, because we started Blue Zoo as a bunch of students straight out of university with no experience at all, and we couldn't afford any software renderers because at the time Maya didn't come with Arnold or even Mental Ray. It was all additional costs. So we're like, we're going to have to use Maya's inbuilt renderer, which actually helped us really kind of creatively problem solve and technically problem solve as well. But it was a horrible basic render. It didn't have any of the nice things like occlusion or subsurface scattering. We had to constantly find every single cheat to make it work, much like you have to with kind of game engines. So after a few years, we could afford to actually move to Mental Ray, where you got nice things like global illumination, ambient occlusion, and subsurface scattering. And we used that for a good few years, but it kept breaking, and it was really hard to get beautiful results. It certainly wasn't any of the kind of the newer out-of-the-box kind of beautiful photorealistic rendering you get these days. So we used that until we got it to about 2014, where we said enough's enough. Everyone hates using Mental Ray. It's causing us untold problems at rendering where scenes falling apart. So we moved to Arnold because one of our projects was Miffy, and for that we wanted to make a very tactile kind of real renderer, because we were very concerned when we took on a project like Miffy, which is a 60-year-old property. We didn't want to be known as one of those studios that takes a much-loved, cherished, iconic character and turns it into a CGI monstrosity. So we said we'll do it if we can make it feel like a stop-motion show, and we couldn't do that in Mental Ray. So we switched to Arnold for doing that, and the problem with that one, it pretty much killed our render farm. We just couldn't render it quick enough. And kind of into a few episodes in, we realized we'd run out of electricity in our building for actually plugging in more render blades. So we had to look for other solutions. So at the time we looked for, in 2015, we looked at GPU renderers. So it was using a graphics card to render rather than the CPU. And we played with Redshift. And at the time, I'd never seen so many kind of jaws drop in the studio, and we demonstrated how quickly it was to do all the beautiful kind of the translucency and transparencies, the stuff that would exponentially add to Arnold render times. So after playing around with it and doing a few tests, we switched halfway through the series from Arnold to Redshift, and we never told the client, and they never noticed, which I think demonstrates how good a job Redshift did. So we then, I think from about 2015, pretty much every single thing has been GPU. So we've been using GPU for a good 4 years or so. And it had kind of multiple benefits because it was faster, which means you can iterate better. There's a slower or a quicker learning curve because you can kind of fiddle with the values and see what the changes are much quicker rather than waiting 10 minutes for a render, which means you can improve the quality and means you can kind of get those iterations out quicker so you have a happier client because they can see their changes quicker. But the problem is the world's sped up in that time where as an animation company, it's quite a risky thing because animation hasn't generally sped up as much as the world. And when I say the world's sped up, audiences are hungry and brands are hungry because, when you have a YouTube channel, they want to see content, every day almost. And brands, they want to see reactive content, and animation can't keep up with those things. And we're also living in a golden age of content where you have all the Netflix and things, and you just can't make it quick enough. So it's really trying to balance that, preserving the craft of animation. Oh dear, that's not good, is it? The craft of animation with getting it, being able to meet what the audience wants. So we looked at game engines. Because you see like the AAA games these days, and it's absolutely mind-blowing the quality. So it's like, well, why can't we use that? So at the time there were options like we could use Unity or Unreal or Blender using Eves, which I don't think was actually available when we first started looking. And we actually make our own apps for some of our shows like Number Blocks and Alpha Blocks, which we do in Unity. So we actually have our own team already using Unity. And previously we'd used Unreal as well when we'd be working with some clients and we were supplying assets for their kind of Unreal projects. So we kind of had experience of both, and some of our artists had used it as well. So we kind of evaluated them and we decided to go with Unreal because the primary reason for that is it was much more artist friendly than Unity was, where Unity's great if you want to do like your C# coding, but if you're not a coder, then it's not quite as, it doesn't have like the blueprint style visual coding, which is immensely helpful. Well, it doesn't have it out of the box. And for us, it came down to that similar kind of Mentor versus Arnold, where you can kind of get similar results, but with Arnold, you can make it look amazing very quickly. And that was why we really wanted to go down the Unreal route, because artists could make it look good quickly. But ultimately, we remain agnostic, and we like to use the best tool for the job. We don't like to get blinkered by brands, so we've switched from Mac to PC before, and we've kind of used all different sorts of software from After Effects switching to Nuke. So we always like to, go for what's the best tool for the job rather than going, no, I'm an Apple person or whatever, because that's not a very productive way to work. So how do we implement this in a busy studio when everyone's got constant deadlines? And it's very hard to try out new technology when it's like joining a moving motorway when you've got 150, 200 people all with a big schedule of work and everyone's got deadlines. So we have to get around that, we have our shorts program, which has been running for I think 5 or 6 years. And with that, we like to try out new technologies and try out new looks and to really kind of push our company forward. Because one of the risks when you're running an animation studio is if you do too much stuff in the same style, you're just known for that style. And then as soon as that style's a little bit passé, you're kind of like, the phone stops ringing. So we always try to be very flexible in the styles to do that, and also to challenge our staff, because we don't want our staff getting bored and quit and go and work somewhere else. We want them to stay in the company, so we constantly kind of challenge them to work in different ways. So with the shorts program, the way that works is twice a year we'll send out a brief to an entire studio, and we'll ask everyone in the studio if they want to pitch in a brief, and then everyone, whoever wants to, presents their pitch to the entire studio at like beer o'clock on a Friday that we have. And everyone then votes, so it's very democratic, and people vote for the winner, and it gets made with the studio's resources. So that's been going very well, and we like to submit them to lots of festivals to get our name out there, and so everyone can see them. So back in February last year, we wanted to do something with real-time rendering. So this was the brief we sent out, and we wanted to tell a story from history, and we wanted to really, the one key thing was we're using Unreal, but the only creative restriction is it should not look like a computer game, because we thought if we send this kind of brief out saying we're making something Unreal, we might get lots of kind of computer gamey, low poly kind of ideas. And we really wanted to push away from that to see what else we can do rather than the kind of the expected obvious things you can do. So we sent this brief out and had the presentations in our studio, and then Dane Wynn was the winner, and he pitched in a story he found about a woman called Ada Blackjack, who was Alaskan, and she essentially, I won't tell you the whole story, but she went to a remote island in the middle of the Arctic Sea and basically got stranded there for a couple of years. And it's a story about the kind of the heroism that she went through and the human strength she survived. So it was a very intriguing story, and so Dane set about getting this story made. So working with the team, we hired a few different artists to try out to explore different looks, and we picked a guy called Sakantu. I've forgotten his surname, but and Sakantu did this lovely kind of like quite pencil-y style that we loved because it didn't feel CG at all. It felt very handmade and almost like paper-like, which was very important because Ada Blackjack's story is known because of all the diaries she wrote. So we thought that connected it to the actual story very well by making it feel like it's all a kind of like a drawing. And at Blue Zoo, we loved kind of like stylized rendering, so it ticked the box there as well. So we were like, okay, no one in our studio knows how to use Unreal, and we've got to make this in Unreal. How do we do that? So Epic invited some of our artists down to their studios in Guildford, and they did kind of a few days of intensive training. And I think it speaks volume about how good the software is, because in a couple of weeks, in about 2 weeks, a couple of weeks, one of our look dev artists was able to kind of make this very initial stage renderer, having never used Unreal before. And it was what we really wanted to try and achieve was a way that artists could light and kind of essentially artistically sculpt the shot in camera. And one of the trickiest things when you're doing non-photorealistic rendering styles is that usually, especially if you're doing styles which involve outline shaders as well, is it's a lot of post work. So the 3D artist has to render it and then send it to someone in Nuke or After Effects who then plays around with it. So no one kind of quite knows what it's going to look like. But in here, this is just a screen capture, how we worked the whole time. So you can see here instantly how it looks. And I think Arthur, who put this test together, has got kind of like one of the filters, so you can kind of move it around the screen in real time. So the aim was to really create tools to allow you to change it as in the final look, as you can see it. Which a lot of it was done in post effects, which you can kind of like turn off and on, and the background was done with a particle system to give that kind of like smudged on cartridge paper kind of look. And we worked out how to kind of break the edges, because I'm sure if anyone knows who's tried to do kind of like cartoon shading before, it's an absolute nightmare to try and get it looking nice. But they've done a great job, and it's still kind of evolving at the moment, so it's really exciting to see it. But you see they've got these planes to do different things, so you can have one plane to mask the background, or one plane to mask the outlines. So you can really see how different it is compared to the kind of the traditional way of putting a shot together. One of the also really good things is a technology called Live Connect, where you can connect Unreal to Maya straight away. So the animator can have a second monitor, and any change they make in Maya, you can instantly see it in the final look. So which means you can kind of like experiment and see how things look. and not worry too much about things you can't see, because in animation it's all about the efficiencies and the shortcuts you can take, so you can focus on making it look as great as possible. So if you can't see something because it's not lit, then you don't have to worry about it, and you can straight away see, or you can see an intersection straight away, so you don't have to get all the way to final render to see you need to move something because it's intersecting with an object. So you're kind of like skipping that whole kind of render farm stage. So here's an example with the environment. So you can see the actual original model is very simple, but it's all the actual the post-effects shaders that really kind of like bring it to life in that pencil shadery way. One of the great things is this is a shot where Ada finds a fox, and from a storytelling perspective, this is very much game-changing because it allows you to tweak the shot at any time, and traditionally with an animation, it takes a very experienced storyteller because the storyteller has to pretty much get the story right at the animatic stage and the kind of storyboarding animatic stage, because it's very expensive to change anything later on, which means you have to have years of experience to be able to read an animatic and know exactly how that timing is going to change from an animatic to go into an animation. So, and this kind of really kind of destroys that process, because it means you can make a change at any stage and it's not going to have this massive knock-on effect to then have to go through kind of like the render farm or light comp or the compositing stage. So it allows you to experiment with the storytelling and see if kind of changing angle works or if the projector works. So that's why it's kind of really great for budding filmmakers, because it allows you the flexibility of experimentation, which kind of goes back to the original quote I was saying. Oh, it's back. And another thing we tried to do was add very simple controls, so you didn't need to do any coding if you're not a coder. So, for example, one of the controls we did was on the rotations of this. The rotations, we actually stopped them from linking to rotations and changed them so they can actually map to fall-offs and things like that. So the lighting artists can actually really look dev the way the scene's working using very simple controls without having to fiddle with loads of little sliders and controls. So it's got that instant feedback to get the shot to what you've got in your mind a lot quicker. And this was an example which Jack, one of the technical artists, wrote, where he was developing tools so you could actually paint the scene. So traditionally, you might have to go through Nuke to put a Bezier spline in to do a kind of vignette. But in this, we're kind of designing tools so you can just paint a vignette around the scene in kind of real time as well. So it's kind of developing lots of tools to really push the process as much as possible to get that exact shot that you've got in your mind. Another great thing that worked was using blueprints. If anyone doesn't know what blueprints are, it's a bit like the hypershader in Maya, where you can connect nodes together to make a bit of code. And one of the things they did with that in this short was using it for the footsteps. So in a traditional CG pipeline, you'd have some sort of Python script or Mel script to then have to go in and place the footsteps, which would require linking up in different shots. But this makes it very easy to kind of like drop that blueprint onto the scene. So every single shot she's in, it very nicely kind of automatically kind of adds those footprints in very easily. So it's, there's nothing that kind of game-changing in terms of technology, in terms of the workflow, but when you actually add all those small things up, they add to a phenomenal amount of time saved, which you can actually put back to, pushing things creatively and visually. And also, if that was using a sim, you'd have to spend forever cashing out alembics and stuff to get that snow, those footprints working. So here's the final result of the snippet. What we did, we rented like a 1-minute section as a test because we had no idea. The whole short's 9 minutes long, and it was very hard for us to actually schedule that production because we've got no idea how long, well, we had no idea how long it would take to actually make it using this kind of like this new workflow. So we did a 1-minute test, and this is that 1-minute section, which is from like the first quarter of the film. So that was our test for the kind of like the pipeline essentially. So that, cheers. So that, we're now animating the rest of that, which is going to be released this summer, hopefully less flickery than it is there. So another great use for this is commercials, because I'm sure if anyone's worked in commercials, they're aware of how ridiculous the timeframes can be. And obviously this is a great use for if you've got a quick turnaround project, you can turn it around a little bit quicker, or essentially get to what you're trying to make quicker, which makes it a little bit less stressful to do. An example of this, I'm just going to show you quite quickly, was the BBC came to us and asked us to make, for one of their TV shows, I think it's on Children's BBC, for a Big Friday wind-up, and they said they needed a new title sequence, and they only had 3 weeks, I think. So we thought, okay, let's give it a go in Unreal. So I thought I'd just talk through how that kind of worked. So the idea was this pinball machine. So within kind of a couple of days, we'd got this pinball machine all kind of modelled using standard ways. I think a bit of it was kind of painted into substance and things like that. So using standard tools. And then it was shaded in Unreal and like animating all the textures and things like that. And getting the UVs moving, so kind of slime flowed along the pipes and the lights sequenced and animated. So in a couple of days, we had this model, which again would be no different to if you were doing a standard non-real-time pipeline, but you're able to actually see the results instantly. So it meant that what's different about this project, so this is kind of what we had after, I think it was, maybe a week. Nice and jittery. But this was essentially replaced the animatic or the kind of layout that we would have, because usually, you'd send a black and white kind of like blocking or layout, and it meant that actually we could see it in a lot more visual context. And that was all the camera moves were done in Unreal as well. So it allowed a lot more of that kind of that final clarity. And realized there were sorts of small benefits as well. For example, the balls were rolling around. Originally, we tried to sim them and just actually make a real game, but realized it was actually hard to art direct some of the ball movements we wanted. So it was very quick. It took the team a couple of minutes to write a blueprint that kind of like rotated all the balls around, so the balls could be keyframes, but then they felt like they were kind of rolling around. So again, small things like that. The particle system worked really well because they could just make a little particle script and kind of drag that into the shot. And then that would instantly kind of, I think they auto-triggered them, I think. So whenever the ball kind of hit bumpers and stuff, it automatically make those sparks and things, which then had that full post-effects pipeline as well. As you can see, it's already got the lens flare and final look, so there's no ambiguity in terms of what it was going to look like afterwards. And to other things like the depth of field, as it's always quite painful when you send a render off if you're doing in-camera depth of field and it's wrong, then you have to send it back, or if you're doing post-depth of field, which always looks a little bit kind of iffy, you can kind of being able to do it all in real time with everything else working as it is with the lights animating and stuff. It allows you to see any issues straight away. And it, again, allows you to just play with it a lot more than you would be able to the traditional way. And another thing we really tried to mimic was in film sets. You always use a lot of cheats. So we can like just put in these blocks of kind of white cubes and stuff like that, white circles, to really fake bokeh. If anyone's been to a film set, there's constantly kind of ways you use of kind of making things look nicer lit. So we really try to kind of emulate that and emulate that film set where you're just putting in lights so you can instantly see kind of how it can make the lights even nicer. And you've always got all the lights moving exactly how they would in the final thing. So I guess with the optics side, it's about kind of faking it, but getting very quick feedback so you can see how it looks faked. So here's the final thing we made after 20 days work. So that was all, a lot of the procedures, like all the LED wall was driven by like little GIFs and stuff, so we could change anything we wanted to. So that was a little example of how it can be used to make life easier in those quick turnaround projects. And now we're doing projects for online content as well. As I said earlier, like with the whole YouTube side of things, everyone needs things very quickly. So one of the projects we're doing is using motion capture to make some YouTube videos. We're doing some with Cartoon Network at the moment, where you can see past my bald head. You can see some tests of the technology where you can see they wanted these kind of like hands that would be actually hard to do by just sticking gloves on. So we're actually motion capturing the hands in real time, then overlaying them, and then working out with some jiggery pokery to remove the tracked hands or hide them. We've been able to make kind of YouTube videos of the top-down ones very easily with the using their characters from the TV series. And we're also doing some digital puppetry shows as well. So we're kind of like just experimenting with different ways of utilizing it that's got quite a different purpose from normal keyframes animation. But what's the catch with it? So there's always got to be a downside to these things when they seem a bit too good to be true. And one of the problems is, how do they achieve such nice results when doing real-time rendering is that a lot of it is faked, and a lot of the beautiful lighting is pre-rendered and then baked into the environment, which means that you still do have these massive slowdowns. So this is one of the kind of light scenes rendering, which means it's calculating all of the kind of global illumination behind the scenes. So if you tweak a light, you might have to then wait 15 minutes for it to bake that light onto the wall so it looks like it's all beautiful. So that's kind of the biggest downside at the moment. But for anyone who's seen some of the new technology on the RTX graphics cards coming out, it's, I think, one of the biggest game-changing technologies since computer animation was invented, because I think this is the reflections demo that ILMX Lab made. And the reason they do all that baking of global illumination and things like that is because you can't ray trace in real time. And what the new generation of NVIDIA cards has is that real-time ray tracing. So this is the demo NVIDIA and ILMX Lab and Epic made, demonstrating how you can render something real-time that traditionally would take hours, to render. So that will kind of like basically get rid of all the current restrictions that there are around real-time rendering to allow you to, do whatever you want, lightning fast. And what's quite exciting is it really kind of merges the light and comp, because that's something that we've kind of been doing at Blues already, because we see a lighting artist and a comp artist in the animation world, less so in the kind of VFX world, but they're essentially the same job because they're just about cinematography and trying to make a shot as beautiful as possible. And there are lots of tricks you could do in lighting or comp. So at Blue Zoo, we now hire artists who can basically take a scene and own that scene and light it and make it beautiful. Whether they want to do it in comp or in lighting, it's up to them. So going down this route, it kind of merges them. So you're not using those two packages, you're just using one. So it kind of makes their job easier of making a shot they're kind of beautifully proud of and they can fully own. And you don't get that kind of that ping pong between light and comp teams of kind of like blaming who's not done what or whatever. So it kind of makes the whole thing more efficient as well. But one of the biggest things we found was the unexpected benefits, because it's great that it's fast and you can see it quickly, but there's an even bigger benefit that's often overlooked, which we discovered, which is working like you're on a film set. Because I don't know if anyone's seen how when you shoot a TV commercial, you have kind of 50 people could descend on a TV set. Many people never worked with each other before. And they all work together and they make a beautiful looking TV advert in live action. And it all just works. And yet, if you try to do that with animation and shoved 50 freelancers in a room who'd never met, it would take weeks and weeks to actually work out everyone working the same way, getting around file naming conventions, and all those unexpected problems of people not sure who was doing what. And I think the biggest reason for that is because in animation, everyone kind of works in these kind of like blinkered silos where no one can see what each other's doing until you all get together in a review session, and which is kind of akin to everyone on the film set wearing blindfolds and all working separately, and then all getting together at the end of the day and seeing what everyone's made and going, oh no, that's not right, let's start again. And I think that's one of the main differences. What is one of the biggest problems and causes most of the problems, and that's just communication. And one of the best things in working in Unreal is like when we were making that test for Ada, we were using Perforce versioning software. And what that allows is everyone to actually work in the same workspace. So everyone can open the same file essentially. And one person can be working on shaders, and there'll be a little blue tick next to the shader of who's working on that shader, while someone's working on lighting, while someone's importing kind of the latest version of the animation. And that gives complete kind of contextual clarity of what everyone's doing. So it's much more like everyone working on a film set, being able to see what everyone's doing and not have to worry or not waiting till you get into a review session to actually have an idea of what's going on. So I think that's almost a bigger game changer in terms of where things are going than just the speed of it. And Epic have really built on this by one of their demos at SIGGRAPH, again using the same demo. And this was their demonstrating their collaborative directing system, which is, I think it's coming out next month, I think, which essentially allows the director to put a Vive headset on and walk around the set and move the camera and move a light, and they can essentially direct it. So you'd have an operator sitting at an Unreal desk, able to kind of like control things real time, and then the director would essentially be standing on the film set with his kind of TV screen in the film set, and they could then move people around or move lights. And it's that amount of freedom and complete visibility of everything that's going along allows you to really get to that final destination of what the director's vision, which is a benefit to everyone, because then there's no kind of uncertainty or having to redo things because it's not quite how the director wanted. Which kind of really kind of comes down to this really, which is kind of the traditional animation pipeline, which is kind of getting the animator passes it onto the lighting renderer, which then passes it onto the render farm, that then passes it onto the comp team, that then passes it onto the grading team. And if there's a problem, it all falls apart. And if the client asks for a change, you have to then go back to the animation team, which then have to pass it to, and rinse and repeat, which is a very inefficient way of working. When really in Unreal, and you can see everything in the final look, it's a lot more like this, where everyone can open the scene, make a few changes, and then you're done and you're off. And I think that's the kind of, for us, one of the biggest changes more than anything, because it allows collaborative creative creation, and that's a benefit to everyone, because it means you can just make work you're super proud of and enjoy doing it. So artists are happy, clients are happy, and you can do better storytelling because you can see if the story's working a lot quicker. And that's a win-win hyphen dot. I think that's a mistake. It's a win-win. So that's what I've got to say. Thank you. I did rattle through that very fast because I did that in an hour before, and I've done it in half an hour. So, because we've got a couple of minutes left if anyone does have any questions about how we've been using real-time rendering. Yeah, there's a question over there.
Hi. So one example that used real-time rendering for TV shows is Zootopia.
Yeah.
I think you heard of that. So it's really interesting how they use it, not only because it's fast, but also because it allows the studio that is using it to create episodes on the go by reusing assets. And yeah, I was gonna ask you, in fact, how you guys are planning to use real-time rendering for your own shows.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the, because there are limits at the moment. For example, at the moment, it's quite hard to do things like fur and things like that. So, hopefully that will change soon. But I think it's, all shows reuse assets. So that's not necessarily a new thing, but it's the ease you can reuse assets, like I showed in the particle system, where it's simply dragging and dropping that previously would, be a much longer thing. So I think it goes back to that kind of experimentation where you can bring an asset, see if it works. If it doesn't, you can quickly move on. So it allows you to kind of like get through it and visually really experiment more. So I think that's where that reusability comes in, that it's just a lot easier to do.
Can I ask another question?
Sure.
Before you showed us the ILM SIGGRAPH demonstration of how they use the ray tracing and also how they implemented the use of VR when using real time. So I was thinking whether you guys already experimented with it, or if you were planning to do something using real time and outputting into VR as well, or if you guys are more sticking to video.
I don't think we'll be in a situation where everyone will be sat in the studio wearing VR headsets. I don't think. I think there's it's a bit like how with gamers, how a mouse and a keyboard is never, when people said, oh yeah, you can use a Kinect, it's much easier. People always go back to the very easiest way of getting things done, which is using a mouse and keyboard. So I don't see that changing in decades really. But what it does allow you is to actually, every now and then step in, or the director to step in and see it in the way they see things, and not be kind of like telling someone sitting at a keyboard, can you move left, can you move right? They can go in and see what the deal is. So I think there's appropriate times to use that technology, and it's not just, we'll give everyone headsets, it'll be amazing, because I think it would slow things down probably.
So more for virtual production kind of.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
No problem. Is there another question somewhere? Oh, yeah.
So how much of your process is done in Unreal, and how much is done in other applications like Maya or using your web?
So that's a good question, because I didn't actually include that bit. The way it works is it's pretty much all the same, apart from doing some of the things like making a bit lower poly models that are a bit more efficient, and rigging in a way that, because Unreal can't use deformers, you have to do more with skeletal rigs. So there are a few changes you have to do at that stage, but otherwise it's pretty much the same all the way until the end of animation, where you then save out FBX files to import them into Unreal. But we have the Unreal, so the real-time ethos, which is to get to final look as quickly as possible. So you really want to get your assets into Unreal to see them in the final context as quickly as you can. So we always try to get there as quickly as we can. And the other route we've also been playing with is via Alembics as well. So for rigs that really need those stretchy deformers, we can then bake them out into Alembic caches and then import them into Unreal. So it's pretty much the same. One's going via FBX and one goes by Alembic. The one difference with if it's in FBX, you have more control of it once in Unreal. We've got 16 seconds.
Just very quickly. Do you find that using motion capture is used more because of the real-time nature of the animation? Is there sort of a push to get more motion capture for the actual characters, human sort of motivated stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question, because we do cartoony stuff, which a lot of the time you try and do motion capture and cartoony, it would just be a horrific kind of mess. So it's really working out the right. I mean, we've got no ambition to move away from keyframed animation, because that's how the best animation is crafted. So it's about finding the right opportunity and purpose. So, for example, one project we're doing is kind of more of a hand puppet thing, where we can do a lot more than you can do with traditional sticking your hand up a puppet's bum style puppeteering. So it's finding a useful purpose for technology rather than using it for the sake of it, which I think too easily happens in technology. So yeah, when it comes to motion capture, I think it's very much the right tool for the right job, rather than, yeah, let's use it because it's a kind of an easy path to use. So yeah, we're doing a little bit of motion capture, but not full body stuff. It's more about how to use motion capture to drive a character for performance rather than a one-on-one mapping.
Sure.